Everyone assumes the AI boom belongs to the companies that own the data centers. So explain this. Meta owns some of the biggest data centers on Earth. And this month, it's in early talks to rent computing power to Anthropic, its own rival, in a deal reported at around $10 billion. The owners are becoming landlords. And this week, the stock market figured out who else stands to win. Here's what's really happening underneath. AI labs need more computing than anyone can build on their own. Training and running models eats graphics chips by the hundreds of thousands. And the bottlenecks aren't ideas. They're electricity, land, and delivery dates. So a new kind of company showed up. It locks up the power, builds the facilities, fills them with Nvidia chips, and rents the whole thing out. Wall Street calls them Neoclouds. Think of them as the real estate business of the AI age. The models are the tenants. The compute is the building. And right now, the rent just keeps going up. Now watch the evidence stack up. In May, SpaceX, the rocket company, agreed to give Anthropic access to roughly 325,000 Nvidia chips for $45 billion over 3 years. That works out to about $1.25 billion in rent every month. A rocket company collecting that. Then, July 17th, the Meta talk surfaced. When a company that already owns its own data centers starts exploring the landlord business, that's about the strongest validation the model could get. And days later, the whole sector repriced all at once. Hut 8 jumped more than 10% on a 15-year lease worth $9.8 billion. And one company surged nearly 20% in a single day on news of its own. That's the story. So who do you actually own here? The obvious name is CoreWeave, the biggest pure Neocloud, but it built that lead largely on borrowed money. And it's the story everybody already owns. Nebius is the European leader, and Wall Street has found that one too, which leaves the one company everyone got wrong. IREN, ticker IREN. For years, people looked at it and saw just a Bitcoin miner. But that label hid what the company was really accumulating. Cheap electricity, locked up years ago at renewable-heavy sites in Texas and Canada, along with the land and grid connections to keep expanding. It turns out mining was training for the one skill that matters most today: locking up power and building data centers fast. IREN turned that capability toward AI, and then it showed the receipts. On July 20th, IREN announced $2.8 billion in new multi-year contracts with leading AI developers. And look at the customer list it now sits on. Microsoft, Nvidia, Perplexity, Figure. Its target for year-end revenue run rate moved from $3.7 billion past $4 billion. And here's the detail that separates promise from execution. 85% of that $4 billion is already under contract. Not projected. Signed. Now compare how these two builders fund their growth. CoreWeave borrowed its way there. IREN is building mostly with other people's deposits and its own cash. $7.6 billion of cash on hand as of June 30th. On its newest contracts, customers prepay roughly 45% of the chip costs up front before the servers even arrive. Contracts averaging about 4 years. And the capacity behind those contracts grows from 480 megawatts this year toward 1.2 gigawatts next year. That's the build-out funded in large part by the tenants themselves. There are 2 pushbacks worth talking about. First, can a Bitcoin miner really run an AI cloud? You don't have to guess. Look at who signed. Microsoft and Nvidia do not hand out multi-year contracts to a company that can't deliver. The customer list is the audit. Second, the build-out itself. Nearly tripling capacity in a year is difficult. And the chips are expensive. Which is exactly why those prepayments matter. When customers front almost half the cost of the chips, they're sharing the risk of the build-out, not just renting the finished product. So here's the picture. AI labs are renting compute faster than anyone can build it. A rocket company is collecting more than $1 billion a month for it. Meta wants in on the same business, and the miner that spent years mastering cheap power just announced $2.8 billion in new contracts, on top of a customer list that includes some of the biggest names in AI, with 85% of its target already locked. That's why IREN belongs on your list. Not because it jumped nearly 20% in a day, but because the rent checks are already signed for the next 4 years. It's a growth story you can hold while the buildings fill up. Which leaves the last question. The moment you decide to own it, what is the best way to? Already trading on Ondo and X stocks. Through a broker, you trade market hours only. On-chain stocks trade 24/7, 365, straight from your wallet. We prefer on-chain for one reason above all. Your profits stay yours, untaxed, not financial advice. Do your own work on the price you pay.